There is a hidden strength inside every person, a quiet fire that flickers in the darkest moments of struggle. It's the kind of strength you may not see until you've been knocked down and have no choice but to rise again. This story is about a young woman named Sarah who found that strength when she thought all was lost. Through her struggles with loss, heartbreak, and loneliness, Sarah learned to turn her pain into power, finding success where others saw only failure. Sometimes, the toughest battles lead to the most beautiful victories, and this is a story of how Sarah turned her struggles into success, one step at a time. Sarah sat alone in her small, cluttered apartment in Brooklyn. It was a cold winter evening, and the sounds of the city drifted in through the cracked window. She wasn't used to the silence. It had been just over a year since her mother passed away after a long battle with cancer, and Sarah still couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that haunted her. Her mother had been her best friend, the one person she could always count on. Now, she was gone. The pain of losing her was still fresh, even though Sarah had tried to bury it beneath her busy schedule, her work, and the hustle of life. But deep down, the grief was always there, lurking. One day, as Sarah was cleaning out a box of her mother's things, she stumbled upon an old letter. It was from her mother, written just before Sarah left for college. In the letter, her mother shared her hopes and dreams for Sarah's future, telling her how proud she was and how much she believed in her. Reading it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She hadn't known how much her mother's words would still mean to her. It was a moment of vulnerability, one that made Sarah realize how much she had taken for granted. The grief, the loss, it was all so overwhelming. But something inside her clicked. She realized that her mother had believed in her so much, and now it was time for Sarah to believe in herself. Sarah's journey wasn't just about loss. It was about the struggles she faced on her own, especially in the face of failure and heartbreak. She had worked tirelessly to build a career in the tech industry, but after years of effort, she was laid off from her job. The news came suddenly, and it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under her. All the hard work, all the late nights, seemed meaningless now. But Sarah knew she couldn't let this define her. She had been through too much already to let one setback keep her down. She remembered the letter from her mother, the words of encouragement, and the love that had always supported her. It was in that moment that she realized her true potential. She started over. It wasn't easy. There were days when she felt alone, when the weight of uncertainty was almost too much to bear. But Sarah kept going, learning new skills, building her own business from the ground up. She remembered her mother's words, "You are stronger than you think." In the middle of her rebuilding process, Sarah met someone new. His name was David, and he was kind, funny, and passionate about technology. Just like her. At first, their connection seemed like the beginning of something beautiful. But as time passed, Sarah realized that David was not the person she had hoped he would be. She caught him in a lie, Something small at first, but the betrayal stung deeply. Heartbreak is a powerful force. It can make you feel like you'll never love again, that your heart will never heal. Sarah didn't know if she could forgive David, but one thing was certain. She had to move forward. Her dreams were too important to let someone else's mistakes hold her back. Months went by, and Sarah continued to pour her energy into her work, focusing on what she could control. Slowly, the pieces began to come together. She launched her own tech startup, helping other small businesses optimize their online presence. It wasn't easy, but Sarah's resilience shone through. She had lost so much, but in the process, she had found something far more valuable: herself. Yet, as Sarah stood on the edge of success, she realized that even though she had achieved so much, there were still pieces of her past that she hadn't let go of. She still carried the weight of her mother's death, the guilt over not being there for her in her final moments, and the pain of the relationships she had lost along the way. But Sarah was learning to forgive, not just others, but herself. It was on a quiet evening, as Sarah sat in her apartment reflecting on everything she had been through, that she realized something profound. She had spent so many years trying to please others, trying to meet expectations that weren't her own. But now, as her business flourished and her personal life began to heal, she understood the true meaning of success. Success wasn't about money, fame, or recognition. It was about inner peace and knowing that you had fought for your happiness. No matter the odds, Sarah's story was a testament to the power of resilience. She had faced so much loss, heartbreak, and failure. But instead of letting those experiences break her, she used them as stepping stones to build a life that was hers and hers alone. Through every tear, every heartbreak, and every moment of doubt, Sarah found her strength. The day Sarah received a letter from an old friend, someone she hadn't seen in years, was the moment that truly marked her transformation. The letter was simple, just a few words of encouragement and appreciation. But for Sarah, it meant the world. It reminded her that no matter how alone she felt, she was never truly invisible. She had people who cared, even from a distance. As Sarah continued her journey, she looked back on the struggles that once seemed insurmountable. Losing her mother, her job, her sense of self. Each of those experiences had been painful, but they had shaped her into the person she was today. A person who had learned that even in the darkest moments, there is a way forward. Conclusion. And so, Sarah's story continued. It wasn't a story of overnight success, but one of growth, healing, and finding light in the midst of darkness. It was a story of someone who had learned to turn her struggles into success, not by ignoring her pain, but by embracing it and using it to fuel her journey. Through every setback, Sarah discovered that the greatest triumphs often come from the most difficult battles. We all face struggles. Loss, heartbreak, loneliness, and disappointment can feel overwhelming. But as Sarah's story shows, the key to success lies in how we face these challenges. We have the power to turn our pain into strength, our grief into purpose, and our failures into the foundation for something greater. The road to success is not always easy, but with resilience, hope, and self-belief, we can rise from the ashes and create something beautiful. As Sarah's startup began to gain traction, her life seemed to be coming together. She had healed from the heartbreak of losing David, and her business was becoming more than just a dream. It was her reality. But even in the midst of her success, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. She realized that in her pursuit of achievement, she had distanced herself from her closest friends. The people who had been there for her during the darkest times were now strangers, and the isolation she felt was starting to weigh heavily on her heart. One evening, after a long day at work, Sarah found herself alone at a cafe. She looked around, noticing how people sat in groups, chatting and laughing. She felt like an outsider in her own world. She thought about the old friends she had once been so close with, friends who had supported her through her mother's passing, friends who had laughed with her during her college days. Yet over time, they had drifted away, just like so many other people in her life. Sarah pulled out her phone and looked at old pictures of herself with her friends, and a wave of loneliness washed over her. The success she had worked so hard for seemed meaningless without the people she had once cared for. She wanted to reach out, but the fear of rejection held her back. What if they didn't want to reconnect? What if they had moved on, leaving her behind? But deep down, Sarah knew she couldn't live her life in isolation. She needed to take the first step, no matter how hard it might be. A week later, Sarah reached out to her best friend, Emily. It had been almost 2 years since they had last spoken. Emily had been there for Sarah during the most painful moments of her life, and yet Sarah had never made the effort to stay in touch. When Emily responded, the message was simple. "I've missed you. Let's meet." It was enough to make Sarah's heart swell with hope. They agreed to meet at the same cafe where Sarah had been sitting just days before. As Sarah arrived, she felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. Would things be the same? Could their friendship be repaired after so much time apart? When Emily walked in, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. There she was, the same Emily with the same warm smile. They hugged, and it felt as if no time had passed at all. They spent the afternoon talking, reminiscing about old memories, and sharing the stories of their lives since they last saw each other. Emily had her own struggles. She had gone through a painful breakup and had been struggling with her own career path. But together, they found comfort in each other's presence. "I'm so sorry for not reaching out sooner," Sarah said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I got so caught up in everything. I didn't mean to push you away." Emily smiled softly. "We all get busy, Sarah. The important thing is that you're here now." The reconnection with Emily was a turning point for Sarah. It reminded her of the importance of relationships, of the people who had stood by her, even when life was hard. It also reminded her that success wasn't just about achieving her goals. It was about the connections she made along the way. A few months later, Sarah received a call from her old boss, Mark. He had been the one who had laid her off from her previous job, and she had never expected to hear from him again. But Mark was reaching out with a proposition. He wanted to invest in her business. He had been following her progress and was impressed with how far she had come. At first, Sarah was hesitant. She had worked so hard to prove herself on her own, without relying on anyone else. But as she thought about it, she realized that this could be an opportunity for growth, not just for her business, but for herself. She had spent so much time believing that she had to do everything alone, but this could be her chance to accept help and build something even greater. After a long conversation with Mark, Sarah agreed. It was a decision that would change the course of her business and her life. With Mark's investment, Sarah's company grew faster than she could have imagined. She was able to hire a small team of people who shared her vision and passion for technology. Slowly but surely, Sarah built a company that wasn't just a reflection of her own dreams, but a place where others could thrive as well. However, as her business flourished, Sarah still had moments of doubt. There were days when she felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of leading a team. She sometimes questioned whether she was doing enough, whether she was making the right decisions. The pressure of success could feel like a heavy burden, and Sarah often found herself asking if it was all worth it. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Sarah sat alone in her office. Her thoughts swirled around her mind, and the weight of it all threatened to crush her. Just then, she received a message from Emily. It was simple. Thinking of you. You've got this. The words were exactly what Sarah needed to hear. They reminded her that she wasn't alone. She had people in her life who believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. A few years later, Sarah found herself standing in front of a room full of young entrepreneurs at a conference. She had been invited to speak about her journey, about how she had turned her struggles into success. As she stood there, reflecting on everything she had been through, a wave of emotion washed over her. She had lost so much: her mother, her job, her sense of self. But she had also gained so much. She had built a life from the ground up, one that was full of purpose, love, and connection. As she spoke to the audience, sharing her story, she realized just how far she had come. The girl who had once felt invisible and lost was now standing in front of a group of people who looked to her for inspiration. It wasn't just her success they admired. It was her resilience, her ability to turn pain into power. And in that moment, Sarah understood something she hadn't fully grasped before. True success is not just about what you achieve. It's about who you become along the way.